Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Heavily Biased Talks College Football. Today we are going to be going over week 6 of the college football season. Last week I had a rough go. I went 3-7 on my picks. Justin, you went 8-6. So far in the year I'm 20-21 and you are 28-22. So you've been consistent, man. You've only had 1 week where you didn't, where you weren't positive. So
Yeah,
it's good.
and I feel like now the games are going to get a little bit more interesting. I think there's no more surprises in my opinion. Like I'm not saying that there can't be an upset, but there's no more like we kind of know by the time you get in October, in my opinion, you kind of really kind of know who these teams are. Not saying they can't go out there and have a bad game, but I think that makes it the analysis even better. Is like now we got a good idea of who these teams are because now they're playing conference games. Every game they're playing is against a good opponent. And to me, this month of October is going to be wild because this college football season. We talked about it, off air or whatever, but I don't even know if there's like a one like dominant team this year. So it's wide open. There could be. I know for a fact there's going to be a two-loss team in the playoff this year. I would think. I mean, it's just going to be that kind of year. I think.
See, I disagree just because I feel like there's, unless something really weird happens, like, the Pac-12 had, like, their champion has 2 losses or something like that, or the Big Ten, you have a champion out of there that's 2 losses, or Big 12. Like, I mean, I'm not saying it can't happen, but I agree with you. I don't think there's any dominant teams this year. I think there's a lot of really good teams, though. And I think we do have an idea of who's who right now, but college football is crazy, man. And, all it takes is for an off game or a ball to bounce a weird way. I mean, we were
Yeah.
talking when we were watching the game, that Michigan State game. I mean, that just, weird things happen in college football, which makes it great. So let's talk a little bit about the Texas game. Obviously, we're big Texas fans. We'll talk a little bit about the game against Kansas, and then we'll transition into the Oklahoma game. So first off, man, I was really pleased with the way that we came out. We kind of hit that part of the game where we're kind of in a lull a little bit, like we're moving the ball, but we just can't. Our red zone offense has got to get better. And I feel like that's the only thing that's really keeping us from really putting it on teams early. But we again, close game. They fumble a 4th down conversion. We get the ball, go right down and score. And then it's just the floodgates just open. And that's the thing I've noticed about this team is, like, man, once we get rolling, it's fun to watch. And it's really tough for the other team to bounce back. Obviously Jonathan Brooks had a career day. Quinn threw for 300. It was just all around great performance. And I was a little worried about how we would looking ahead to Red River. I was worried about, that looming, and if anybody would look over Kansas, but we didn't. And it was just another one of those great games where we can just sit back and enjoy it, and there's no stress going in late. So what were your thoughts on the game?
Yeah, once again, our offense looked really good. The running game has been looking great the past 2 weeks. Brooks is kind of elevating his play to where he is becoming, arguably one of the top running backs in the country. I mean, I don't even know if that's arguably. I think that's for sure a thing. We got two great receivers. We got a really good tight end. I know Sanders got banged up a bit, but and Quinn, again, it all comes down to Quinn. I mean, that's the honest truth. I mean, I think that's going to be the difference in the Oklahoma game is I think Oklahoma is going to try to stop the run. I think that's going to be their first priority. And so I think there's going to be a ton of plays in the passing game, but just in terms of the week. I mean, you can't complain. I'd give it an A, from last week, just because I felt like every facet of the game we dominated that game. And again, the defense, I say it every week, the defense, I think we have the best defense in the country when we're playing. I just think we have the best defense in the country. I think that defense is going to keep us in games. And normally I'd be worried about a couple of games on our schedule, but knowing the defense is going to be there every week really kind of helps you get out of those slow starts.
Yeah, I mean, our defense is just, I mean, they're just completely shutting teams down. The one thing that I think we need to, that worries me a little bit in this Oklahoma game is we are a little susceptible to big plays in the passing game. We gave up a few in the Alabama game. We gave up one last week. Like, that's the one thing that I think can hurt us. Everything else, man, we're just like, our defense is just clicking on all cylinders right now. So let's go ahead and start, because, man, there's another great slate of games this week, whether it's ranked on ranked or rivalry games, just good matchups from top to bottom. We'll go ahead and we'll start with the OU Texas game, Red River Rivalry. Oklahoma, the 12th team in the nation, going against Texas, number 3 in the nation. The over under on this one is 60.5. Texas is minus 6.5 last time I looked. And there's a couple of things with this game that always worry me. And the first one is, you can throw records and what's happened before this game, and like whatever the records are, whatever the team has looked like going into this week, you can throw all that out the window. There's been times where OU has had way better rosters than Texas has had, and Texas has either won the game or been right in there till the end. And I just feel like this game, you just never know how it's going to unfold. And that's the one great thing about it, but it's also the one thing that always keeps you nervous as a fan. The thing I will say that I think Texas has going for it is, I do think our line of scrimmage, both sides, is just dominant. And I've watched a little bit of OU play, and it just seems like they've had trouble running the ball this year, which is always a big part of their offense. And they've also had some trouble stopping the run. And I feel like that's where we're going to, like the last few games, anytime it gets to that second half and especially fourth quarter, you can just tell, man, teams are just worn down. And I feel like that's another thing that we're going to do to Oklahoma. I feel like we're deeper than them. Our roster, I feel, is better than theirs. And I feel like if both teams played the best possible football they can play, I think Texas is better and Texas wins. Again, rivalry games, you just never know how they're going to play out. But I really like Texas in this game. I have them covering, and I wouldn't be surprised if – I don't think it's going to be anywhere close to what it was last year. I just don't think that – I think that's something that's very rarely going to happen in this game. But I wouldn't be surprised if we're up a couple scores, late with the ball out, and we just kind of run it out, kind of like we did against Alabama. What are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, my thoughts are pretty much the same. I mean, look, it's not going to be 49-0 again, so, I'm not anticipating that. I'm also not anticipating a game that comes down to the wire. Like you said, these type of games are always tricky because we don't really know how good Oklahoma is. I think the whole country is going to find out how good Oklahoma is this week. I think most people think Oklahoma is good, but not a great team. And I think a lot of people think Texas is a great team. Let's see if Texas can even elevate their play, which I think is exciting if you're a Texas fan. That I don't know if you've even seen the best version of Texas this year yet, which is scary for everybody else. I think there's just, look, if people are picking Oklahoma, I think they're picking it simply because it's the contrarian thing to do. I don't know if I'm using that word, if I'm using that correctly, but
I think so.
It's it's like, I truly feel like there's nothing on the film that would warrant Texas not covering a 6.5 point spread against this Oklahoma team. I just don't. And again, a lot of the argument out there is like, well, this is going to be the best. Gabriel's going to be the best quarterback Texas has played all year. I agree with that, but I don't think Gabriel's an elite quarterback. Now, he could have an elite game against us. I do worry about, like you said, miscommunication in the secondary, him getting some big plays. I'm also a little worried about just the 11 o'clock kickoff. You never know. I usually feel like with these games, there's always a huge play at the beginning. Like there's like a special teams touchdown, there's a huge defensive play. So I don't, I think Oklahoma has to get that going early. I think Oklahoma has to have those type of plays to win. And we've seen that happen where the lesser team in these type of games wins because they turned it over. They turned a quarterback over a couple times, or they got a special teams touchdown. That is going to be how Oklahoma wins the game. But I'm with you. I think Texas dominates the game. I think they put up a lot of yards. I'm going to kind of stay away from the over simply because I'm not sure how the game flow is going to be. I do think Texas is going to run the ball very well, but I do think there's going to be some great plays in the play action that are going to be there for Texas. And if Quinn can hit those to X and Mitchell, it could be a huge day for Quinn. So I'm taking the -6.5 Texas all day. That's like, to me, that's like probably my lock of the week. I just think Texas is a better team in every aspect in every, offense, defense, special teams. I think we're better. Coaching, better.
Yeah, I think that Texas, look, if Caleb Williams doesn't come in 2 years ago to that game, we were blowing them out in that game too. Should have never lost, but that again, that's one of those weird things that happens. I just think that the difference for Texas also is Quinn. I don't anticipate him having a bad game. In fact, I think he plays his best when in these type of games, the Alabama games, OU last year, he played fantastic. Even if he has an off day, I feel like we're talented enough running the ball, doing other things defensively that we can still win the game. Gabriel has to play the best game of his career, I think, for them to win. And while that can happen, I do think that Texas, just up and down the roster, is just more talented. And there hasn't been many times in the past decade, I guess, that you could say that about Texas versus Oklahoma. So that's exciting for me.
Look at that Cincinnati. I was just going to add real quick that I look at that Cincinnati game, like the two games I'm looking at, if it, like, to me, that's like the tail of the tape, is like I look at that Oklahoma Cincinnati game and I look at the Texas Alabama game. And this is, again, I don't, just the eye test shows me that Alabama is a more physical team than Oklahoma is going to be. Alabama had their hands full with our offensive and defensive lines, like had their hands full, like we were imposing our will on Alabama. I think that happens with Oklahoma. Like, I feel like Oklahoma, like their argument is like, well, hey, Texas really hadn't played an offense like ours. I don't think Oklahoma's prepared for the amount of, like you said, the talent level this year, I think, is pretty big. And so I think Texas is about to string along a bunch of, I think we're in a position where we can dominate this rivalry for a while just because of how much talent we have and how much depth we have at those positions on the offensive and defensive line. I'm with you. I think that's going to play a huge part in this type of game. And like you said, other than quarterback heroics, I'm with you. That's the only way I see Oklahoma winning, is either getting a big, defensive or special teams touchdowns, or Gabriel just playing out of his mind. I think that's the only way this happens. So yeah, I'm locking it in Texas -6.5.
Yeah, and last thing I'll add for this game is just, I do think it's time for Texas to kind of go on a little bit of a run. Like OU has put together some long runs where they've beat us multiple years in a row, and I feel like this is kind of the time for Texas to do that. I do think Oklahoma's better this year than they were last year. I don't know by how much, because OU last year, the first 3 games were blowing people out too, and then they played K-State and was it TCU maybe? Anyways, and they lost those 2 games, so you're kind of like, okay, how good are they? I feel like that's kind of the same thing. I know they're better this year than they were last year, but so are we. And I don't know which. I feel like we've grown even more as a team, maturity wise, and closing people out than maybe OU has on their, you know, different sides of the ball, especially on defense.
Well, and
so,
look at the big plays Iowa State was getting in that first half last week. I mean,
Yeah.
Iowa State
They were running
was
it.
getting anything they wanted in the first half. So it's going to be interesting. Like I said, unless you're just wanting to be different, I don't think there's any way you can look at that and say, you know what, man, I feel really good about Oklahoma plus 6.5. I think the majority of people are going to be on Texas, which worries me a bit, you know, obviously, because, like, you know, those are the ones that always can get you. But, yeah, if Texas plays a good game, I think they cover that. So,
well, and again, if they, and I don't want to look ahead, but Texas takes care of this game, they've got the easiest route the rest of the way out of all the major contenders. And I don't even think that's a question. I mean, Michigan still has to play Penn State, Ohio State. Ohio State still has to play Michigan and Penn State, I think.
yeah.
USC has to go through the Pac-12. Same with Oregon and Washington. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. So I got you with Texas plus or minus 6.5. Next game up, let's go with the Kentucky-Georgia game, which is Kentucky's the 20th team in the nation going at Georgia, number 1 team in the nation. Over under is 48.5. Georgia is minus 14.5. This game to me is weird because I feel like Georgia is still number 1. I don't feel like they've earned that other than what they've done in previous years. That's the only reason why they're number 1. Excuse me. And Kentucky looked really good last week. I think this is a kind of a brawl type game. I think this is a game that's going to be won in the trenches, but I do think it's close. I just really like the way Kentucky plays. Like they're just always right there. Like they're always going to play hard. Mark Stoops is doing some great things there. And Georgia's just off. There's something about maybe they're complacent. You know, maybe it's hard when you win 2 titles back to back to kind of put your best into every single game because it's just a long season and you know that you can just roll the football out and beat 95% of the teams in the country. But something about this game is just, you know, is just kind of off to me. So I'm going to go with Kentucky to cover this. I don't know if they win the game, but I do feel like they're better than Auburn and I feel like they're better than South Carolina, and both of those teams had Georgia on the ropes, especially Auburn. So give me Kentucky plus the 14.5, and I would not be surprised if this is a 1-possession game going towards the end.
Yeah, I'm feeling the opposite about it. Every time Kentucky, and I don't have the official like numbers in front of me, but it just seems, just based on years past, anytime Kentucky has been like a team that you're almost thinking is going to make that next step to actually compete, you know, like to really make some noise, they always come into a game like this and just lose, like, and usually get dominated. And again, that might not even be accurate, but I just feel like every time Kentucky is on the cusp of like a signature huge win like this, they come in and they don't perform like you would think. And I think Georgia is still finding itself, but I'm Georgia minus 14.5 all over this game. I almost want to go under. I really think I like the under in this game. The only thing I'm nervous about is I think that Georgia could get a couple of like, I think Georgia's going to have great field position all game. And if Georgia jumps out early on Kentucky, like goes up 14-0, it's going to be very difficult for Kentucky. Kentucky's got to keep it like close the entire game. They cannot afford to get down by a couple touchdowns. So as much as I want to take the under, I'm going to be taking Georgia minus 14.5. Again, if Georgia doesn't come out and the game goes like you said and they look like they did last week, then I'm just going to assume that Georgia's not a top 5 team in the country this year because they have not looked like a top 5 team. But if they come out and take care of business, I think I'm just waiting for that to happen. And so it might be wishful thinking, but I think this is the game that they can do it. I think Kentucky has a really solid defense, but I think everything Kentucky wants to do, Georgia does better. And so I'm going to take Georgia minus 14.5.
Georgia, I saw a stat today that Georgia has, for the first quarter, because they're just been getting off to terrible starts, they have a plus 0.0 line after the first quarter this season. And that is, they're the only team in the AP top 20 or 25 that you can say that. So they've got to get off to a better start because, some of these teams are going to be good enough to punish them if they don't. They haven't faced a team like that yet. Maybe Kentucky is that team, but you can't keep getting off to these bad starts and crawling your way out of them. Sooner or later, your luck's going to run out. Next game up, let's go with Washington State, number 13 at UCLA. Washington State is plus 3.5. Over-unders at 59. What are your thoughts on this one?
My thoughts are that I really love Washington State this year. I've talked about him a little bit in previous weeks. I think Ward is just a phenomenal quarterback. I think their offense is looking great. There's no reason I shouldn't be taking Washington State, but I don't know why this game worries me like big time. Like I don't know why, but like there's something about this game that I feel like this just has UCLA winning it all over it. There's no like analysis that I could give you. I think Washington State is a better team. I think their offense is super explosive. So I'm just going to play it because I have no idea how this game's going to go. I think it's going to be super close. Again, like I said before, I think Washington State is a better team. So I'm going to go with the over 59, and I feel really, really good about the over 59. I think Washington State at least puts up 30. And again, if UCLA wants to win, they're going to have to put some points up on the board, but Washington State's going to put points up. I mean, whether it be, through the passing game, through whatever, but their offense is just clicking right now. And so I'm going to go the over 59 for this one.
Yeah, the one thing that's got me a little worried about my pick is UCLA did have an off week last week. They had a terrible showing offensively against Utah. They only put up 7 points, but other than that, they put 35 against San Diego State, 59 against NC Central, which that's not.
Utah makes everybody play. Utah makes every game like that. That one's almost an anomaly to me. Washington State's going to give up points and give up yards. Like they're going to want to outscore you. So I think there's going to be plenty of offense in the game.
Yeah, I actually like Washington State a lot in this game. I just feel like their offense is just clicking right now. Cam Ward is just a difference maker. And I don't know if UCLA is in that top echelon of Pac-12 teams yet. Yeah, give me Washington State. I mean, but that's one of those lines that's so weird to me that it's almost like, man, they're trying to tell you something. But I really like Washington State this year. I think they're kind of a dark horse team. So yeah, give me Washington State plus 3.5.
That line to me kind of says like, hey, UCLA hasn't played up to what we think they are, and Washington State's playing a little bit above what we think they are. So that's kind of that line to me. But just based on watching both teams play, I think Washington State is a better team. They are a super explosive offense. That's I'm kind of like, I like Washington State too, but my official pick is going to be the over just because that game feels like a game. When a team is not used to being like where Washington State is right now, ranked in the top 15, everything's clicking for them. That just seems like a recipe for, especially on the road, for UCLA to get their season back on track. Like this is UCLA's season right here with this game. So they're going to be ready for it. And I think Washington State, I just see a lot of points.
Yeah. All right. Another big game. This one is kind of turned into a kind of a small rivalry game, just because the last couple games have been super close. Number 11, Alabama at Texas A&M. Over-unders 46.5. And the line is Texas A&M plus 2.5. This was another one where I initially wrote this down that the over-under was 50, and now it's down to 46.5. I don't know if I wrote that down wrong initially or not, but this game to me is, I feel like this could be a game where you really find out who Alabama and Texas A&M is, not only this year but going forward. I feel like I feel like Alabama has kind of figured something out with Milroe. Like I think they were trying to make him into something he wasn't. They were trying to drop him back and throw 40 times a game and read defenses and all. That's not his game. You need to just kind of let him be an instinctual thrower and runner. And I feel like they're better where you need to be good, especially in SEC, the offensive line, defensive line. And I think Alabama wins this game. I do think it's probably close. I don't know. And A&M, they're one of the more perplexing teams in college football to me. Like sometimes they look great and their offense is clicking and their defense is getting after people. And then sometimes they just lay eggs to where you're like, man, who is this team? Who is this team? They have 5 stars up and down that roster, and it doesn't look like it sometimes. So give me Alabama. I feel like this is a game where they are going to kind of impose their will a little bit. They can't get behind early with Texas A&M because Texas A&M is explosive. But I do think that if Alabama can impose their will early and often, then it could be a long day in College Station. So give me Alabama minus the 2.5, and I feel pretty confident about it, but I do think it's going to be a really good game.
Yeah, the trouble with this one is this isn't the same Alabama team. This is probably one of the weaker Alabama teams in the Nick Saban tenure. Obviously take away those first few years he was there. Just in terms of the depth and the skill positions, there's nobody on the offense that really that I feel like is a game-changing type player yet. I feel like their defense has struggled at times. I feel like that Texas game kind of showed that while they used to kind of dominate in the trenches, that gap has definitely closed. And then on the flip side, I think Texas A&M has performed better than people were expecting when the year started. Like, when they saw the first couple games this year, I think they're starting to find their groove a little bit. So I don't know this is the toughest game of the week for me to pick because I have no idea who either team is yet. And so this game will really kind of show me that. As much as I want to take the under, I think there's going to be at least one defensive touchdown in this game. I think special teams and defense is going to just dominate the game. I feel like whoever can make the most plays in those two phases of the game win. Man, Jimbo's had Saban's number too, so this is a really tough one. But I'm gonna go with Alabama here as well. I think it's gonna come down to one possession, and I think that Milroe makes big plays with his legs. I think that he makes big plays with his legs this game. I think that they do just enough to win this one on the road. I think that this is going to be an insane environment to play in. Like they're going to be ready. Milroe, I think they're going to get comfortable early with short passes and running him a lot this game. Man, I don't feel good about it, but I'm going to take Alabama as well.
And I mean, Jimbo to me hasn't really had his number. The last couple games they've been really close. They won in 2021 41-38, and then they were super close last year. 24-20 they lost, but other than that, they've been 20-point losses or so. But I do think that there is something that in the last couple of years their rosters have been a lot better, Texas A&M's, and they just, for whatever reason, this is their, now that they don't have Texas to play, this is kind of the game that they really get up for, and they've been playing them close the last couple of years. So I do think that continues, but I think Alabama.
Yeah, and I think that's what I kind of was referring to, is that even with last year, you could argue that they should have won that game. And I feel like Jimbo usually has a good game playing against Alabama. I think that he's going to have this is probably his best opportunity. Like we just said with Texas and Oklahoma, Texas A&M has an opportunity to, you beat Alabama 2 out of 3 years. Like, not only do you have bragging rights, but that's big for recruiting. That's big for everything. So, obviously A&M's going to be going in with their backup quarterback. And so that, I don't know what's going to go on there. So I think that's why the under is probably going to keep slipping lower. So if that slips down to 44 before kickoff, I might jump on the over there. So if I would keep an eye on that. But yeah, I'm with you, Chris. I think that Alabama, and I don't feel good about it. This is my least like confident pick, but I'm gonna go with Alabama with you as well.
And I just think that the days of Alabama and some of these other schools having just super deep rosters, I think those days are over. With the transfer portal, these guys that aren't getting as much playing time as they want, like you constantly have to keep guys happy all the time. These guys are just going to leave. I mean, it's just inevitable. So I think those days of having teams where you just have, 5 stars as third string guys, I don't know if that's going to happen as often now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I do think it's going to make everybody a little bit more competitive and everything kind of more evened out. So, all right. So, next game is – this one is really intriguing to me. It's number 23 LSU at number 21 Missouri. Missouri is +6, over under 64.5. Man, LSU just – every time you kind of start thinking like, man, LSU can contend for a title – Their defense is so bad. They were giving up just chunk play after chunk play last week. And, yeah, they can score with just about anybody, but when you can't stop anybody, what's that quote that the guy from Mighty Ducks says? No lead's safe if you can't play defense or something. Big. No, the guy from
no lead is safe if you don't play defense.
Yeah.
No lead is safe.
I like the other one too, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, man. Like, I don't think Missouri's that great. I think they're kind of living off of that K-State win, and that was a great win for them. But I do think LSU is better. I just don't know where their heads are at right now. So give me the over in this one. I feel like 64.5 is super low for these two teams, and I just feel like it's going to be back and forth scoring, kind of like it was last week with Ole Miss and LSU. So give me the over. I wouldn't be surprised if Missouri pulls this off, but I also wouldn't be surprised if LSU thumps them like they did Mississippi State a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I hate to keep referring back to week one, but in our week one show or whatever show it was, we were kind of talking about, season totals or whatever. My two teams that I really like to get over their season win totals was South Carolina and Missouri. South Carolina's looking like they're going to struggle to get there. Missouri's looking really, really good. They got, Cook, I think it's Cook, the quarterback. He's playing great football. I mean, he had an incredible game last week. They got 2 really good running backs. And I think that I'm with you. This game just feels like LSU's going to win it. Like, I don't, or I'm not with you. Like, I know you kind of said you're not sure where it's going to go, but I might stick with the over as well. But Missouri just like, the game's going to go one or two ways. Either LSU is going to just blow out Missouri, or Missouri is going to win by a field goal. Like that's truly the only way I see the game's going. I don't see Missouri blowing out LSU. So if Missouri can only win by a field goal, you're going to take the under here. So it really comes down to, do you think Missouri's going to win at home against LSU? I think Missouri is a little bit better than people thought they were. I think LSU was way overhyped at the beginning of the year. Oh, man. Give me, this one's tough too, man. Tough games this week, but give me Missouri with the +6. Yeah, give me Missouri with the +6, man. It feels gross, but I just, because I think that LSU, like, this is their season. We keep talking about that, but this is their season. Like, they drop this one, they're looking at, they're looking at a tough road the rest of the way. So they have to have this one. And I think Missouri needs this signature win for their program. And I think this is the best team I think this is the best chance Missouri has to really make some noise. So give me Missouri with the +6. I'm not sure if they win, but I think it comes down to a field goal. Yeah, Missouri +6.
You sounded really confident about that. But yeah, also, man, they've got
just because like I said, Missouri only wins this game close. So I'm contradicting myself because I said it comes down to a field goal, but give me Missouri +6. So I think Missouri's going to win the game. And I also picked up Missouri's kicker in my fantasy league. So that's why I'm focused on field goals.
Field goals. Yeah. Well, don't forget, man.
Here's what I'm gonna do. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take the over as well. So scratch the Missouri +6. I'm gonna go the over. I'm chicking. I'm getting scared. I'm chickening out of the +6. I'm gonna ride with you on the over. I like the over as well.
All right. Are you sure?
Yes, I'm gonna ride the over.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So also don't forget about Luther Burden the third. He is on my college fantasy
yeah.
team. He's a monster.
He is a monster.
I feel like
It's gonna be big plays in this
where
game.
they can. Yeah, I feel like that's where they could really hurt LSU, and I just feel like this is going to be one of the most exciting games of the week, which is saying something because there's some really good matchups. But the thing I hate is that this game's on at the same time as the Texas OU game. But yeah, I do think it's going to be a lot of points, and I'm kind of rooting for Missouri because they've got a tough road ahead after this game. So they got LSU this week, then they've got Kentucky, South Carolina they got at Kentucky, South Carolina at home, at Georgia, Tennessee at home, Florida at home, and then at Arkansas. So
My God,
a big
that's
win
all
here
games
would
they
go a
could
long
lose.
way, but that's yeah, I mean, it really is. I saw a thing, and we'll cover it at the end, but remind me to bring up Michigan's potential schedule next year. It'll kind of blow your mind a little bit. So, all right, so last game on the slate before we get into our additional picks is Notre Dame, the number 10 team in the nation, going to Louisville. Louisville is the 25th team in the nation. Louisville is +7, over under 54. This was the toughest one for me to pick because I don't feel like Notre Dame is very good. I feel like they're kind of like they're to me they're a better version of Utah. Utah makes you play like really gross games. They kind of grind it out, but I feel like Notre Dame's better. And Louisville just I feel like this is their Super Bowl. You know, if they could pull off this win, this is their signature win that the coach can hang his hat on, that the team can hang their hat on. I feel like this is going to be kind of a gross game that goes back and forth. I don't know how great Notre Dame's offense is. They got a really good running game. So give me Louisville to cover and the under on this one. And again, I don't know. I just see Notre Dame. They went to the wire of Ohio State, which there's no problem with that. But they should have lost that Duke game. That Duke game was right there for Duke to win, and Duke just gave it away. So yeah, give me Louisville and the under on this one, and I feel pretty confident about it.
Yeah, Louisville looked terrible last week. If this would have been a week before that NC State game, I would have been all over Louisville. I would have been Louisville money line on this game. They looked terrible last week against NC State, in my opinion. Plummer didn't look good. The running game wasn't looking great. That's the thing, though. I mean, Plummer has looked really good this year. So is Johnson, the running back. But man, Notre Dame. One or two things are going to happen. Either Notre Dame's going to be the most tested team by the end of the year, where like you're like, my God, how did they get through all these close games? And even though they lost to that Ohio State game at the very end, I mean, I think after a while these close games catch up with you. And I'm not sure if it happens this week. Again, if this was 2 weeks ago, I would have been all over Louisville. But Louisville showed me a lot of things I didn't like last week. I think Notre Dame can exploit that. I actually think Notre Dame is a good team. I think Sam Hartman has to elevate his play. I think he has been middle of the road, to be honest with you. I don't think he's been playing as well as he can play. I think that there's going to be opportunities against this Louisville secondary for Sam Hartman to have a big game. I'm anticipating Sam Hartman having a big game. So give me Notre Dame here with the -7. That's a line I didn't really like. I was hoping I could get that line about 5.5. 7's pretty big considering how Notre Dame's been playing. But I think that Duke and I think obviously Ohio State, both those teams are better than this Louisville team in my opinion. But
Yeah.
Louisville is explosive. So if Notre Dame doesn't give up the big plays, which I don't think they do because they're very, other than putting 10 men on the field, the defense has been pretty solid this year. I think Sam Hartman has his best game as a quarterback of Notre Dame, throws for 3 touchdowns, has a monster game. And so give me Notre Dame -7.
Also, the running back for Louisville is Jawar Jordan.
Jordan. Yep.
Yeah, and he's a monster.
Sorry, I went against him in
sometimes
fantasy as well, and so I tried to forget. You know what I mean? I tried to forget.
Yeah. All right, so those are our picks from the main slate, and now we'll get into our additional picks. So I've got 4 picks that I like this week. I like Colorado -4 at Arizona State. I just feel like this is a game that Colorado can kind of get the wheels going back in the right direction. I feel like they're way more explosive than Arizona State. I feel like they can put it on Arizona State if they play well. And they have a lot to build on from last week with USC. I feel like the way they kept fighting and got back into that game, I thought was impressive. So give me Colorado -4. Texas Tech -1 at Baylor. This was initially Texas Tech +1. So that's flipped, but still, I don't think Baylor got a huge win last week, one that they desperately needed, but I still feel like Tech's better. And give me Kansas -2 at home against UCF. That's such a weird line to me. I guess they're assuming that Daniels isn't going to play, but Bean has been good for them. He was good for them last year when Daniels went down, and UCF is coming off one of the worst losses you can have. We're up huge on Baylor and gave that game away. So I think they're kind of down right now. Give me Kansas -2. And then I added this one late. Arkansas +11.5 at Ole Miss. I feel like Ole Miss has had 2 huge games they get up for, Alabama and then LSU last week. I feel like that takes a toll. Arkansas hasn't been playing very good football, but I feel like they'll bounce back. Sometimes going on the road, playing against a team that you're not expected to play well against, I feel like that's going to go in their favor. So, yeah, so give me Arkansas to cover the 11.5.
Yeah, the ones I really like this week is I really like. I'm gonna kick things off. I think this is a Friday night game. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is a Friday night game. It is. Yeah, give me Nebraska money line. Nebraska's looked really bad this year, but I've watched both teams play. I've watched Illinois play as well. I think Nebraska is a much better team than Illinois is this year. I just think Nebraska really gets in their own way, and Nebraska has no offense. So this is going to be an ugly game. I would almost take the under as well. I'm going to stay away from that, but you get Nebraska at +3.5. I'm going to go ahead and take the money line there. There's good value there. I like Maryland +20 at Ohio State. I mean, I think Maryland's looked really good this year. I'm pretty surprised, to be honest with you, that line is that big. And I just think, again, I've watched, Ohio State. Eventually, Ohio State's going to put it together, you would think, and have a great offensive performance. Maybe people are banking on this being that one. There is points to be had against Maryland's defense, I'm sure. But I like what I've seen from Maryland. So give me Maryland +20. I also really like Syracuse +9.5 at North Carolina. I think Syracuse is still a good team. I mean, they're without their tight end, but I still think they're a good team. And North Carolina's kind of been hit or miss this year, so I could see that definitely being an upset alert game right there. And then finally, Purdue and Iowa at 38.5 total points. I don't know why, but that one just, gosh, I want so badly to take the over here, and so I'm going to. And this is just a complete gut check, but because both offenses have been dreadful. But I think that there's great.
What's the over under?
38.5. So I'm going to take the over here. Complete.
Yeah, that's
check.
that's one of those. Yeah, man, that's one of those that you
got to
take because the number is so low, but the whole time you're just like super nervous about it. Like anytime they get past the 50, you're just thrilled.
That's a game you bet and you just stay away from it. Like you don't watch the game. Yeah. You just stay away.
Yeah, because it's going to be gross.
I'm not going to bet this game because I'm not too confident in it. But if Taylor plays, the running back from Minnesota who didn't play last week, Minnesota +19 is very intriguing to me. I I think Michigan's a much better team, but I think Minnesota, like you said, with the team it being People's Super Bowl, I think Minnesota is ready for that game, night game. I think they run the football a lot. I think that game gets over with quick, and so anytime a game's going to be at that pace of running game where the clock keeps moving, I usually like to take a big swing at that. So, but I'm not going to take it, but I'm just looking at it. And then finally, I'm trying to find the night game I really liked. Oh, this one is one of my locks of the week. I said Texas is one of my locks of the week. This is my number 2 lock of the week. Give me TCU minus 6.5 at Iowa State all day long. I think TCU is still being disrespected because of a lot of things. Like, I don't think TCU's that good this year, but I think their offense is explosive enough to put up a lot of points. And Iowa State's defense just this year has been just not very good. So I think Morris has a huge game. I think Bailey has a huge game. So yeah, give me TCU minus 6.5, and that'll be my that'll wrap up all my additional picks. There's some really good games this week that I think are,
yeah, this is a really good this is a really good week. And earlier I was talking about that I saw something about Michigan, that their schedule, they've released part of the conference schedule for the Big Ten next year, and their schedule is crazy. So they're going to play Texas. That's already in stone. They're going to play Ohio State, obviously, but they're going to play, I believe they play Penn State as well. And then they've got at USC, they're going to host UCLA, and they're going to host Wisconsin. There was a graphic that I wish I could find it on Twitter that showed like the full possibility of teams, and everybody, like if you go on Twitter, everybody's just talking about how this schedule is just going to be like, it's going to be like a murderer's row of teams week in and week out. But you know, I will say with the playoff going to 12 teams, I do think it's going to allow for some of these like more big name matchups, because you're not going to be as afraid to lose a game here and there. You know, if you have that kind of schedule and you lose 1-2 games, you're still probably in if you're Michigan, you know? So I just think having those big marquee matchups week in and week out is just going to be great for college football, and I'm excited for it.
And you see, that's the issue. That's the issue with the NFL right now. Every time I watch NFL Sunday, and again, I'm not complaining. Anytime I can watch football, I'm happy. But these primetime games have been just atrocious, man, with the NFL. And that's what I love about college football. That's why I want to continue to see big programs taking on teams. I think when they expand the field, you're going to see even more of that, because I think that there's less stress about like, man, if we drop one game, like that could be it. You know, I think that it benefits you more with the NIL era and all this stuff. And Chris, I want to add one more game. I was on the fence about it, but I'm going to go ahead and lock it in. It's kind of an upset because they're the 24th team in the country. Give me Wyoming money line. They're at plus 5.5. They're at home. Give me Wyoming. I actually got to watch Wyoming play twice this year because I watched the Tech game and I watched the Texas game. They showed that they could stay in it with Texas in an ugly defensive-minded game, and they showed that they could outscore Texas Tech. I think those games are going to help tremendously with close games, which I see this one being with Fresno State. I think Fresno State's really solid, but give me Wyoming money line to wrap up my my additional picks. Just that one just is one I was on the fence about, but I wanted to lock it in before we wrapped up here.
All right, so yeah, and I agree with you, man. I just feel like the problem the NFL runs into is they schedule all of these Monday night and Sunday night games in advance. And in the NFL, you don't know who's going to, look at the Jets. They obviously thought that Aaron Rodgers was going to be playing in these games, and he's not. So, yeah, you're going to have Kansas City versus the Jets with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, that makes sense. The good thing about college football is they have the schedule out, but they don't have the time set yet. So they can go in and say, okay, this team's kind of faltering, so let's drop them down to the, 11 o'clock game or whatever and push this game to, if College Game Day did that where they predicted where they were going to go at the beginning of the year, then it'd be the same thing. They'd be going to games where there's no interest because both teams are having a down year. So that is one of the benefits of college football, and one of the reasons why
Who's on?
Go ahead.
Before we wrap up here, again, obviously, Texas is on upset alert. Teams like who are playing other top 25 teams. But what's a game that you're looking at? Because we're going to get it sooner rather than later. An upset that none of us are seeing coming. Like, what's a game this week that you think a team is truly on upset alert? It's not going to be an official pick from you, but who do you think could be a team that gets upset that maybe we're not seeing right now?
Well, I mean, and again, obviously, I'm trying to stay away from games that, like OU. Yeah, if they beat Texas, that's an upset because Texas is favored to win. But in rivalry games like that, man, you just never know how those things are going to play out. So I never look at it as like, man, that was a huge upset or whatever when those two teams meet. I guess the one that really sticks out to me is I'm kind of with you on the Maryland Ohio State game. I just feel like this is Maryland's opportunity to kind of, show that they've arrived a little bit this year. And I guess my second one might be Syracuse, North Carolina. North Carolina's had games where they've looked fantastic, and they've also had games where they just couldn't do anything. Drake May for the season, this is insane to me. Drake May for the season has 1,100 yards, almost 1,200 yards passing, but he's only got 5 touchdowns and 4 picks. That is crazy.
Yeah.
So I guess those are the two that are kind of lingering that I think might. Well, and also Arkansas, Ole Miss. I would not be shocked if Ole Miss kind of has a letdown after last week's huge emotional win. And I feel like Arkansas is hungry. Like they've got to start getting wins if they want to get bowl eligible. I feel like this might be a chance where they can sneak up on somebody because they've got Ole Miss. Yeah, they've got to. I mean, their schedule's not insane, but they got Ole Miss, at Alabama, Mississippi State at home, at Florida, Auburn, FIU, and then Missouri to close it out. So, they've got some tough games ahead, but I do feel like there's gonna be 2 or 3 games that come down to the wire that shouldn't, and it's gonna make for a fantastic week. So,
I think that I'm not saying they're going to win. I think it's going to be closer than people think. I'm not going to add it to my official picks either, but I don't know why. But the Minnesota Michigan game to me seems like that's going to surprise people. I think that one's going to surprise a lot of people. And I also think, oddly enough, even though I don't think they've looked that great, and I know that Florida State's coming off a bye week, Virginia Tech, Florida State, Virginia Tech just always seems to like. They're one of those teams that you never want to, just because of the history. That one just keeps looking at me like, hey man, keep an eye out on this one. Again, both of these games are going to end up being 50-point blowouts. I know it because I've put it on the radar now. But those are the two that I'm looking at that could be potential upsets that nobody's expecting. That you're kind of looking at it like, oh my gosh, that game's in the third quarter and Minnesota's within a touchdown, or man, Virginia Tech's within 10 in the final 10 minutes of that game. Like those are two teams that I see, especially Michigan. Michigan hasn't been tested at all this year. So if Minnesota can get physical with them and run the ball really well and keep the offense off the field, Michigan, the way they play, you never know. But, those are the two that I'm looking at. I'm with you. I already put Syracuse out there, but those are the ones that nobody's looking at that I think could be a lot closer than people are thinking.
Yeah, I got to completely disagree with you on the Minnesota one, just because I've seen Minnesota play. I had their quarterback in one of my underdog picks, and it was like watching. It was just like watching the worst thing you've ever seen, but you couldn't take your eyes off of the screen because it was just like I think I bet like he had to go over so many passing attempts, and it was just he had like 3 passing attempts that looked like they were going to get picked, and their quarterback is really bad. And I feel like if you're going to beat Michigan, you have to spread them out, kind of like TCU did, and you kind of have to be able to throw it around. And I don't think Minnesota can do that. But again, this is kind of what we look for when we're looking at teams that can possibly pull off something miraculous. Stranger things have happened, But yeah, I do think this is going to be a very interesting week. I do like having the Texas OU game early, especially if we win, and then that way the rest of this Saturday I can enjoy. I don't have to, argue with y'all about who needs to be fired and who needs to be on the bench. We can just enjoy the rest of the games in peace. So hopefully Texas will pull out a win and we can enjoy the rest of our Saturday. So Justin, thanks again, man, for joining me, and let us know what teams you're high on this week, what teams you think we've overhyped, and which games you're looking forward to. So we'll see you next time, and thanks.